According to new research from Amazon Ads and Skift, 97% of travelers will take a leisure trip in the next year. These customers are looking for more than a deal. They're looking for a new experience. Travelers discover destinations through entertainment, recommendations, and everyday moments, with 1 in 4 finding their next destination while streaming shows and movies. That's where Amazon Ads comes in. Amazon Ads Solutions empowers advertisers to engage travelers across Prime Video, Twitch, and shopping channels with personalized messaging that inspires and converts. Ready to transform your travel marketing? Visit advertising.amazon.com to learn more.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Skift Travel Podcast. I'm Skift's editor-in-chief, Sarah Kopit, here, as always, with Seth Borko. Hey, Seth, how are you?
I am great, Sarah. How are you doing?
Good. So we are recording this on a Friday this week, and I am ready for the weekend. I am ready for Thanksgiving, which is coming up, and I am ready for today's podcast. And today we have on Ken Cruz, who has taken kind of an interesting journey into hospitality, going from Wall Street to a little bit of, dare we say, woo-woo hospitality investing. I don't know if that's fair. We'll get into it.
So first of all, Ken, welcome to the podcast. Ken is the CEO of a hotel brand called Soul Community Planet. Now, this was, I have to admit, not a brand that I knew a bunch about. It's come up a couple times in my research, and I'll tell you why, and I will save this for the end of or maybe not the end, but for later on their podcast. But you've raised a lot of money, which I want to talk to you about. But before we get into that, what is Soul Community Planet for our listeners? It's a hotel, or it's not a hotel, or it's a travel brand. It's not. What is it?
Yeah, great. Well, thank you, Seth and Sarah. Appreciate you having me here today on this lovely Friday morning. Love the question. Seth, I'm surprised you didn't know about us. We were one of the winners of your prestigious Skift Ideas Awards a couple of years ago.
There's a number of ways I've heard about you, and I agree. The Ideas Award is a great one. I meant that as a segue into a question. I'm giving the audience a teaser of what to expect. But Soul Community Planet has made an impact for sure. But what is it?
Right. Well, first of all, I love that, Sarah, you just described it as woo-woo hospitality. My wife and co-founder, Pam, kicks me every time I use the term woo-woo. But I think it's a fair, one of many fair designations for the segment that we're navigating through. So what is Soul Community Planet? Well, Soul Community Planet is the product of what I would say at this point, a very long career in the hospitality industry. And I look at my career as being a series of kind of fortunate milestones where I've had that chance to learn from some of the best and brightest in our industry. We've had a tour of duty at Marriott International, at the Host Hotels before it became, or it was Host Marriott at the time before it became Host Hotels, and worked with the team there to figure out the destiny of that company. And it was such a gratifying and somewhat arduous process, but over the course of many, many years, we helped to create as a team the what is today the Blue Chip Lodging REIT. Moved over to a company called Sunstone Hotel Investors, which had just come public when I joined, and it was sort of looking and feeling very much like Host did when I joined them in the late 90s. That's how old I am. And worked on a similar transformation there. So just happened to join really good teams, sort of interesting businesses that were facing challenges of their own throughout the course of my career. But I look back at each step of the way, and it just helped to provide the tools and experiences and substrates and to some degree the knowledge of what's working in our industry and what is not. So when I left Sunstone Hotel Investors at sort of the peak of the equity cycle and said, look, what I've got today is this toolkit that enables me to go out and build something new and unique and that aligns more closely with my own personal value system. And very quickly after I had that conversation with myself, I hoodwinked my wife, Pam, into the process and said, hey, we're forming this new company. You're going to be head of what's called ABC, Awareness, Brand, and Culture. I'll do the business stuff. You do the, as Sarah said, the woo-woo stuff. And the general idea was to form a company that capitalizes on what we've learned, that addresses some of the needs that were emerging, in a very profound way in our industry that weren't being met by the legacy companies for a variety of reasons. I'm sure we'll get into that later on today. But that also gives us an ability to make a positive difference in the world and prove out this idea that you can form a successful and productive company that starts with something other than just the traditional capitalistic mindset of we got to make profit. Profit is the driver, as Milton Friedman said. We sort of disavow that idea, and we're coming up with a different angle, which is you build a company around the values of your customers, put them first, focus on making the world around us a better place, which sounds so lofty. And again, I love the term woo-woo. It's not woo-woo. It is absolutely a simple thing. We each make choices with every single thing that we do, whether we're going to positively or negatively or in maybe a neutral way impact the world around us. Most times it's a very tiny, tiny little impact that we have. But nonetheless, we get to make the choice as to how that impact hits the world and what type of a ripple we create. So our company is about making the world around us a little bit better. The cool thing is there's a whole lot of people who think in those terms as well and who aren't having that same level of resonance and connectivity with the service providers, the businesses, and so on that they interact with. So we're filling a much needed void. And so far, it's been working pretty well.
So I'm curious, you said something earlier, our audience here is mostly travel executives. And so you said, you made this choice and you started this business to address what wasn't working and what was working in the hotel and hospitality space. So, for the benefit of our listeners here, tell us what you very specifically, what you thought wasn't working and what you were trying to solve for.
For sure. So think about the hospitality industry. It's one of the oldest industries in the world. And it's dominated by these amazing, big, huge, great companies. Marriott, Hilton, you pick the name. They're phenomenal companies. And again, we've had the good fortune of working with many of them. As you're also very well aware, our industry is somewhat trifurcated. And what I mean by that is that we've got the brands, we've got the management companies, and then we've got the real estate owners. Each one has a very specific business mandate. Each one has a very specific skill set that's required to maximize value within those different verticals. It makes complete sense. However, when you think about how that trifurcated structure operates over time, there's inevitably going to be a divergence of interests, divergence of focus, and ultimately some significant economic leakage that occurs from one bucket to the other. I think you guys have heard quite a bit. I know many of your listeners know this about this kind of value shift that's happened over the course of the last 10 years, where you look at the real estate owners, there's some phenomenal companies out there. I look at my old companies between Host and Sunsum. These are great companies. They're very well run. They're doing the right things. And yet you look at the value of the real estate that they own, it's just continued to go down as Wall Street has opted to go different directions. Meanwhile, the C Corps, the brands, have seen significant growth in their value. And so that's a great example of the tension that exists in our industry, and I guess I could use the term inequities that occur over time between the capital investors and the brands. That's not to say that the brands don't deserve the upside that they've gained, but it is a great example of why the industry is a disintegrated structure, doesn't work super well. So the first thing that we set out to do was to create a vertically integrated company. Sounds great because now we've got all three of those different entities under one roof, all controlled, by us. It also means that we have a 3-ring circus. Instead of just a 1-ring circus, we have 3 rings now. Somehow we have to be experts in brand building. We have to be experts in operating hotels, and we have to be really good at capital deployment, asset management, hotel acquisitions, all that good stuff. As I said a moment ago, very different skill sets. This is why you don't see this happen too much in our industry. Also very different levels of capital intensity, with the brands being, capital light and asset light, and obviously the real estate investors being asset heavy. So structure is one thing that differentiates us significantly. As a virtue of that structure, though, the value system that we represent, the vision that we abide by, can be much, much more deeply immersed in all aspects of our business versus what you might find from the big chains, for example. Nothing against the big chains. They're phenomenal companies, as I said, but when they see an opportunity, in demographic trends or psychographic trends, what they're relegated to do is create a concept that can be adopted by the developer community. Typically, they're oriented around new builds. Now, obviously, you're seeing a shift more toward conversions and those types of things, which is great. There's a lot more opportunity there for net unit growth. But most of the stuff has traditionally been new builds. So they have to create a concept that a developer can
So Ken, wait, I just want to clarify for our audience. So you're referring to like the Marriott Moxie brand, which was very kind of lifestyle, millennial focused. And they did that with a large, I forget the name, you probably know it is, but they had a large investor to underwrite it and say, we want to put XYZ amount of capital to work in this hotel. This is the demographic we want to target. Create us a concept that you can then brand build around, and we'll give you the capital. That's kind of the sort of dynamic that you're referring to.
It's one way, or even that, and that's a more integrated approach. There's also, you think of creation of, I don't know, True by Hilton or pick up a great brand, but it's designed for a developer to pick up, and it's also designed for a third-party operator. Any number of this disparate group of operators can pick it up and understand what it is and operate it. With us, everything is under one roof. So when we want to go deeper with the value system that we represent, the cultural practices that we have at our properties, or because we don't have a great, long-term, completely formed vision, when we want to make changes, it's much easier for us to make changes to the art entity.
So can I just reflect on something just for a second? Because I think it's interesting what you're saying. We think, and this is something that I'm thinking about, when we think about brands and consumer research, we so often, at Skift in particular, we'll think about the consumer. What does the consumer want? How can the brand meet that? And what you're saying, Ken, is that a lot of these brand designs actually aren't necessarily designed for the consumer per se. They're designed for the owner, the operator, and sort of the consumer.
They're designed in balance, right? They're designed, I think and look, I can't speak exactly for what happens.
I know. We're talking generics.
In the visioning sessions, but it's typically, I think the genesis is, hey, this is a new consumer trend. This is a space that we don't currently occupy. When you think about the segmentation of the brands, we can penetrate this. We can generate net unit growth. This, I'm putting my brand chain hat on. But then where I'm saying that the dilution can occur, and I don't mean this categorically, but where the dilution can occur is when you come up with a concept that has to be somehow easily adopted by developer community and third-party manager community.
Kind of low. Well, you're not saying this. I'm not putting these words in your mouth. I'm saying it. But what you're effectively maybe I'm hearing is it's kind of a lowest common denominator approach. When a big chain wants to create a brand, because they have to make all these compromises, they can't be as deeply embedded in specifically a lifestyle. So what is Soul Community Planet? What is the market that you want to go super deep into? What is the consumer demographic that you're like working on?
Who stays with you?
Who's the customer? Who are these woo-woo customers, as Sarah says? Well, it's you and me. Okay, so here's the starting point. 9 out of 10 Americans identify with this label, conscious consumer or mindful consumer. I don't know what
You're kidding. 9 out of 10?
9 out of 10 Americans identify with the label. Let me ask you this, Sarah. Would you like to make the world around you a little bit better place if you had a choice?
It depends on the day.
Okay,
frankly.
Depends on the day. You might be the 1 out of 10. If you have a choice to help nature become a little bit more vibrant versus...
Yeah, I know, but I get you.
So
I get you.
Or would you make nature a little bit more vibrant?
Well, Ken, we were debating this on an earlier podcast, and I'm sorry, we're not giving you these easy wins, Ken. I know. Obviously, in a perfect world, I would.
I think you're saying a lot more about you guys than it is about me. So let's keep going.
I don't know that I want to pay more to do it, though. In a perfect world, for the same exact price, of course, I would do it. I would make the world, nature, a better place. But would I pay? If you're telling me that I can't have my trip, or I can't go visit my family, or I have to pay double, do I want to make nature a better place? I don't know.
Did somebody say that? Who said that? So that's like a weird logic, because on your own research, on Skift, your own research shows that a significant percentage, especially of the younger cohorts, a significant percentage will go out of their way and pay more for experiences that represent the lifestyle and the value system that they abide by. Think of it this way, from a consumer standpoint, this has been proven over the years. Individuals buy products that represent who they aspire to be. Okay, so the data is overwhelming. So, but you guys brought up price. I'm not the one who brought up price. Let me say it this way, and we can get into this next. We have something called fair trade pricing. We don't determine the prices that we charge. The consumer determines the prices. So we can go that. No, I'm not kidding. We have fair trade pricing. The fair trade pricing policy is we lead with this. when you show up, we say, and welcome, thank you for helping to make the world around us a better place by choosing to stay with Soul Community Planet. You've helped to plant a tree in a unnaturally deforested area. You're helping to clean ecologically sensitive beaches. You're helping at-risk youth through all these different programs. We're not handing you a trash bag and saying, go clean up trash. But when you do it through the NGOs that we work with, you are helping to make all those measurable impacts happen. We also say, and by the way, while we have a suggested price that you've signed up to pay, the price that you pay is ultimately determined by you based on the quality of your experience, and anything that you determine would be an appropriate price to pay, that's the price that you will be paying. And the crazy thing, so when we went out with this was with our first property and our test kitchen, I like to say. We went out with this and we did get, I see Sarah's eyebrows raised. We got a lot of that from a lot of people. And they're just like, okay, you guys are going to be crucified. You guys are going to get dragged to the streets. And we found the exact opposite. So we measure this very closely. We're, a bunch of, even though we're, as Sarah said, we're woo-woo, we're also a bunch of MBAs that love to do data-driven decision-making and validate what we do. And we have KPIs through the, through the roof here. And fair trade pricing is a critical element of our story, and it's one of our unique, I won't say competitive advantages, but it's certainly one of the unique attributes of Soul Community Planet. It does a few different things. It levels the playing field immediately. It changes this whole skeptic mindset that when you walk into a business, is it me against them? Is this a confrontational, adversarial relationship, or are they really going to do something for me? Human beings are transactional in nature. If I give you $1, I want to get something that's at least worth $1 back. Okay, so we can avoid that whole skepticism that many of us feel when we walk into a new place. That is, why are they telling me this is a $400 stay? I haven't consumed one bit of it, and yet I'm committing to contractually, essentially, pay the $400. Ours is totally different. And so we measure it and we say, look, if we're doing well, and this has got to have two different variables associated with it. If we're doing our job, we're going to have a high net promoter score, and we're going to have a fair trade pricing incidence of less than 1% of total revenues. If you look at where we are today, we've got a significantly higher net promoter score than any of the other existing chains or brand companies. And we do fair trade pricing tracks at about 0.5% of revenues. Now, what I point out, like last quarter, for example, we had a downdraft in our net promoter scores. We're in the mid 40s. We should be pushing 60 and ultimately in the 70s. What I want to look at then with that is if our NPS is going down, is our fair trade pricing also going up at the same time, or is that going down too, as we're not utilizing that lever? And so at this point, those two work very well in conjunction. The perfect world is you've got a moderate 0.5% fair trade pricing, and you've got about a 60 net promoter score or above.
Wait, just Ken, to clarify for our listeners, the fair trade pricing, when you say 0.5 incidence rate, that is basically let's round it up. Let's say basically 1% of your, not clientele, but of your revenues are people saying, hey, I don't think I got a fair trade on this. Yeah. The suggested price you gave me was not right. I want to price below that.
The light bulb was burnt out. There was a spider on the wall. There was, we don't do alarm clocks in the room, so you can't use that example. But the alarm clock went up at 3 a.m. Who's had that happen? This is why we don't do alarm clocks.
Do they have to give you a reason? Can they just pay you $50 because they want to?
Great question. No, because think about it. There are other brands that have that policy sort of buried underneath the covers. And you as the customer feel like I've got to beg for it or ask for it or argue for it. That's not how this works. It's simply, hey, I'm checking out today. We do try to solicit feedback because that helps us to improve. That's one of the lines on our code is we recognize that we're far from perfect, but we'll always continue to improve. And so when you create that initial alignment with the customer, that goes back to the question that was asked, how are we different? We truly do seek to form an alignment with our customer where we're both on the same side of the table instead of across the table from each other. We're all part of the same tribe or community, if you will, that's focused on, as we said, conscious living and helping to make the world around us a better place. So when you continue to reinforce that relationship through things like fair trade pricing, typically what happens, I'll give you the first example. The first example of fair trade pricing, again, in Colorado Springs, our general manager, we were in a meeting with him and he said, okay, we had our first instance of fair trade pricing. It's February in Colorado Springs and the hot water This is a brand new rebuild.
No.
The guy had a meeting. The hot water was off, and he said, "Hey, I had such a great stay. It was wonderful. I love everything about this place, but I didn't have any hot water. I know you have fair trade pricing. Can I get $20 off?" And I just said to them,
Bless.
like, I know, I
Yeah.
said to my supervisor, you give them a free stay and the next day free too, please. And then of course, that's what we do. We try to, obviously always try to overcompensate.
Can people pay more?
So I love that you asked that too, because that has been asked of me. Of course they can. I don't know that we would even accept it if they offered to. We probably would, but that's a lovely question. And I am not aware of any time that somebody has actually gone that far.
I want to go a little deeper into your properties because hoteliers, we love, it's all about the properties, the stays. So you've got this alignment. I know you give back. You have this alignment with a customer. You're all about wellness. How does that show up on your properties and in your design? Because I know you have these like really peaceful rooms and a mattress made out of avocados or something like that. So what's going on?
Very uncomfortable. Yeah. So, and I would be happy to send you guys we have a lot of things that we call our key brand tools. So we have a design guide that's around 50-page document that goes into all sorts of details on the design standards within our hotels, things that we call our core elements. For example, we lean toward biophilia, where there's typically a living wall or multiple living walls within our properties. We have something called our SCP Muse, which is our depiction of our Pachamama or Mother Nature that is the same individual, but is adorned in local flora. And it's typically hand painted on something or created on something that's a different medium based on the destination. There are a whole bunch of those design cues that are a little bit sort of handcrafted. We tend to call this the design aesthetic, Scandi boho. I'm sure that also triggers your woo-woo sense, but it's just like
that's not a woo-woo sense. The Nordic, the Scandi Nordic, it's slightly different than it's the minimalist. It's the
I was going to say I
minimalist.
kind of like Scandi boho. I would.
But so think of it as 4 P's, right? We have the physical product, and so that's the environment when you walk in. What's the scent? What's the music like? What's the lighting like? And typically the way I describe that is, we typically use bergamot as a scent. You walk in, the lighting's a little bit more dim than you would have thought it would be. The music's maybe up one notch higher than what you thought it would be, and so it's just sort of this skewing younger vibe when you walk in. From the next piece, so there's the product, the physical product. There's the programming. And I'll talk about the other 2 P's too, promotion and premium pricing. But on the programming, we try to create a foundation of programming. We don't have typical resorts. We do have 3 different expressions of our brand. And if you think about SCB Wild Free, which is more vintage motels, that's not a resort. It's a cool motel stay. By SCP is the highest expression, and that is typically lodges and maybe a bit more within that multifaceted resort model. But most SCP hotels aren't like the Grand Wailea, right? We don't have a whole group that's providing all sorts of different activities and programs. So we try to be very careful about the programming that we provide within our 4 walls, either in terms of how periodically it happens. For example, in Laguna Beach, we do once or twice a month. We typically have mini retreats or tea ceremonies or, sound baths, also all this other, kind of really fun stuff that people love to orient around that creates a sense of community.
My wife loves a sound bath. It's crazy. She did one and she came back. She's like, I need more sound baths. I'm like, what is the sound? I mean, I know what one is now, but it's so funny you say that.
Between us, I don't know what it is either. No, it's my same thing. My oldest daughter now works with us and she runs all that and she does such a great job, but there's some real stuff there. I gotta be a little bit more.
I want to hear about the other piece, but I have to know, is your clientele really young?
Interesting question. So you think about I think we call it the say-do gap, right? Where people use the statistic that 9 out of 10 Americans identify with the label conscious consumer. That's because it's a very low standard and you can say whatever you want to say. You move lower into the cohorts and the younger you get, the more action-oriented they are around that concept. So certainly, I would say our clientele does skew to the lower end of the, Gen Z, millennial, on down through whatever the Gen Alpha is. And
you've got like the premium consumer. They're rich and young.
Yeah.
I would it's what everyone's looking for. Yeah.
Fair depiction. However, with SCP Wild Free, that's, you got the backpackers and the folks who are out to go on adventures on Pikes Peak or what have you. And it's truly not meant to be We typically achieve premium pricing within our sets, but our set, in the case of Wildfree, could be, very, select service, mid-scale type properties. If you go to buy SCP, the lodges, our Costa Rica Corcovado Wilderness Lodge is $1,200 to $2,000 a night. So it just depends on which expression you're orienting in. But yes, you're exactly right, Sarah. We aspire to occupy the premium end of the spectrum of pricing for whatever set that we're occupying. So yeah, I guess to use your term, the rich young people is maybe one way, but I really think we're for everyone.
And so the P's were what? It was purpose.
No, well, we can do those P's as well. I tend to think in P's, but we messed up because we have 4 P's. So product. So creating a product that's truly on brand and unique and sort of embraces the location and the story of the existing property. Then it's programming. And I'll give you an example of programming. We'll skip the sound baths and the tea ceremonies and all that, which are so popular. But in Laguna Beach, for example, we do something called the Epic Dawn Patrol. And that's programming that's got a lot of thought and sort of intent behind it. But from the consumer standpoint, it's like, I'm from Iowa. I came to Laguna Beach. I get a chance to go experience surf the way that the real California surf culture would. We take them in our vintage Land Rover down to San Onofre Beach at dawn and do this whole, fire and great food. And you learn from a surf pro about how surfing works and what the do's and don'ts are in the surf lineup. You get out in the ice cold water. This is not tropical. This is California. You're with nature. The sun rises, hits your eyes, and you get all these wonderful benefits. You're also typically in a setting that pushes you outside of your comfort zone. Many of us, feel like being out in the waves is a little bit, horrifying at times, especially where we are. There's sharks everywhere. But the point is, this is an experience that has so many different facets, all of which will resonate in some different way with each of the folks who engage in that programming. But it's very unique and it's very, intentionally designed to be something to create take-home value. It's experiential and then it creates take-home value. It's those unscripted moments that isn't because you have an avocado mattress or you have neat lighting in the hotel. It's because you got to meet a real local surfer and sort of learn how they think about, the world around them. So there's this community engagement. There's soul, right? There's well-being.
Soul. You say there's community, there's soul, and what's the third one? Planet.
And planet. So obviously you're immersed in nature when you do those types of things.
And then your other P's were what? Premium. And what was the fourth one?
Promotion. So promotion isn't about what we say about the company, right? What we say matters less and less and less. And you've seen this over the last few years as the consumers have become more and more democratized. Nobody cares what we say, how much we love ourselves and what we say about ourselves. It's important that we have great video and imagery out there. But promotion comes down to word of mouth. And I'll tell you about how we measure that in our business. It comes down to earned media. Love Skift, but our travelers aren't reading Skift, but our peers are. Great publication. Thank you guys. And great platform. Here's a great example. In our business, we only have 10 hotels. We certainly don't have the network effect where you're going to be staying at multiple of our hotels over your ordinary course of travels, and yet we have a 65% direct booking rate. Why do we have a 65% direct booking rate? We hear this time and time again. Hey, a friend of mine stayed at your Hilo, Hawaii property, and they said what a great stay they had, and I happen to be traveling to Colorado Springs, so I'm here. And it's just that story repeats itself day in and day out across our company. To get that level of direct bookings is, for a small company like ours is pretty cool.
Our head of podcasts, Will Slickers, who's not on this call, but he's based around the Colorado Springs area. So we might need to send him out to see what's going on.
We're in the middle. So that is our first SCP Wildfree. We can talk about the expressions and why we're now 3 different brands within one tiny little company. But that'll be our first Wildfree. We're just starting to swing hammers there. So send them over to check out the before. Yeah. It's going to be pretty cool.
Can I ask you, and this is what I was alluding to at the jump, before you won a Skift Ideas Award, we wrote about you in 2022 because you raised $210 million of venture capital.
Yeah.
And you are a fully integrated hotel brand. And that stood out to me. That's genuinely why I one of the reasons I want to talk to you is that you don't see the Marriotts of the world doing venture capital raises. You don't see the host hotels of the world doing venture capital raises. You see asset light tech companies and you are an asset-heavy hotel company. 200 million made you one of the biggest venture capital raises in travel in, I think, 2021.
Yeah.
So that stood out to me. And I want to know more about the numbers. I don't know how much you can share with us, but like, what does that mean to have a venture capital, like to raise that much money? There's very high expectations from your investors, I assume, and it costs money to buy hotels, and people can fair trade. I mean, what's that side of things look like?
Thank you for asking that question, because so many of us are, and there's so many great little businesses that have started up and they're sort of moving forward, and yet the capital formation element of our business, whether you're asset light or like us, kind of hybrid, it is never easy. And think back, I've mentioned before, I've got such a fortunate track record, very public track record, whereas, senior leadership at Sunstone, hotel investors, at the nadir, our equity market cap was under $100 million of equity. We're a New York Stock Exchange traded company, and this is going into the great financial crisis and everything else. And when I left as CEO of that company, we had taken it from 100 million of equity market cap to 3.5 billion of equity market cap. And that's all public record. And we massively outperformed our peers. We deleveraged by more than our peers. We bought the right stuff and sold the right stuff. And as a team, executed extremely well. And so look, I'm not trying to brag, but it is really important when you're forming capital around a venture like Soul Community Planet, you got to start with something that is beyond, hey, I've got a great idea and I'm a really good person. So that's been very helpful, no doubt about it. That said, typical capital is formed, as you said, around real estate, very monoline focus on real estate investing, or it's a consumer business like capital style investment that's more tech, based or what have you on the C Corp side. So to find a partner, we got a terrific one that saw the whole picture and appreciated what we've been talking about today in terms of the next generation of hospitality companies going back to this integrated model, this vertically integrated model. So they've been wonderful to work with, and I will tell you, it's still, there's every day we talk about, hey, we really need to get the first P, the product, fully on brand at these 5 hotels. And, there's committees, there's all this other stuff that I've left that world that we still have to deal with. But it has been very, very helpful to have a like-minded venture partner. And we're going to continue to, I think we're going to continue to grow with them and work toward additional.
So are you profitable yet?
So great question. So our brand, so again, three different pieces. All 3 of those pieces need to be profitable over time. Our brand is, so it holds the IP, it does the marketing, it does all the good stuff. We don't do third-party contracts. We only manage our own hotels, and we have a very, what I would say, below market fee stream, royalty fee stream that comes into our brand. That said, our brand is highly profitable for what we are. We're very small, but it's not only highly profitable, but it's got sustained profitability. So it's what we found over the course of the last few years. We did start tabula rasa with this company, and as much as I don't know how to run a hotel, I've worked in a hotel. I'm supposed to have learned how to run a hotel. I'm still not nearly the expert level that many people are. Building a brand has been a lot of fun, but here again, I don't know how to create a hotel brand, and nor does Pam or the team, but we've figured it out as we go, and we're learning from a lot of mistakes. And so one benefit of all that, ignorance and that inability, is that you don't necessarily feel like you have to do the things that have been done for decades in our industry. So at this point, our corporate structure for the brand itself is ultra lean. We have very little expense that runs through that. And again, it just, obviously there's no leverage on that or anything. It's a very profitable little entity. The management co as well is profitable, but let's call it essentially neutral. We don't run it for a profit. That is meant to be a service provider to our hotels. And then the fees that come in, essentially keep the lights on and keep that team running. What we have found, though, as we've evolved, and we never had a huge team here, we've found that certain layers that we thought were critical within our organization, through the use of technology, AI, new systems, et cetera, we found that many things that we thought we needed could be removed from the system with virtually no loss in traction or growth. So the brand, the management co are profitable, and then of course the hotels have to be profitable because they're capital heavy. So That said, there's a lot more room to improve even on all three of those areas, certainly with our hotels. As we invest more in the marketing and awareness building around each of our hotels, you'll see the marketing line item in particular decline as a percent of revenues. So that's the one area where if you look at the P&L, we've got, that's not the one area, but there's many. As we grow revenues, we'll see a better flow through to profitability. But yeah.
And then I want to ask you, because I'm thinking from, again, a broader hotelier perspective, you said that you found that there was actually stuff that you could cut, and you kind of gave these broad things. You said technology, AI, those are very broad. I would love to know, to drill down on that a little bit and say like, I think that's such a fun question. Maybe it's not a fun answer, but so what are hotels doing that they don't really need to do that you found that you could cut? I mean, I would love to know, get a little more detail on that. I think that's such an interesting insight.
At the operating level, so first of all, we don't see need or even any way to warrant cuts at the guest-facing level. Human beings are social, right? And one of the things that is going to evolve more profoundly in the world that we're moving into is that people are going to want more person-to-person contact. I love talking to you guys on this video screen. It's really fun, but I would love to be in the same room with you as well. And so the more people are able to, look, I think technology is going to enable people to travel a lot more. AI is massively changing the world. I wish any of us had the full answer for how that plays out, but I like to use the term because it's appropriate. I'm sort of this delusional optimist, and it's served me quite well throughout my career. And in this case, I look at the age of abundance thesis that you've probably heard advanced around AI as being the most probable. And what that means is people have more flexibility, more money, more ability to travel, more appreciation for getting back to nature, more ability to care for their own selves. Everybody kind of lifts up this hierarchy. That inures directly not only to travel, but also to the value of the asset, the types of assets and the locations like the Northern California coast, Southern California coast, Oregon coast, that we own. They're not making any more of that. So that stuff is going to appreciate more greatly. So we don't see a need or any justification for cutting folks who are greeting the guests and interacting with the guests and taking people out on the epic dawn patrols. Where we've found plenty of room for streamlining, I'll say, to be euphemistic, is at the upper echelons. So many of the layers within businesses and at our corporate level as well. You know, we don't have a traditional head of revenue, a traditional head of operations, a traditional CFO. Even I've worn those hats in my own career, and that whole layer did exist at one time. And we're not that old of a company. It doesn't exist in our organization today. And nothing against the people who filled those seats; they were phenomenal. But we just don't. We found that this business doesn't need that. We can run very, very efficiently and effectively without those additional layers.
Amazing. The customer is your chief revenue officer. They pay what they think is fair.
Yeah. We just say, here's the suggested price. And as we said, the fourth P it's actually two P's, is premium pricing. So we do the suggested price is always a premium. And that does actually bear a little bit of conversation because it's sort of counterintuitive to some revenue management types. It's, hey, if we want to fill up our hotel, supply and demand, this is elastic demand. We're going to cut rate and fill up the hotel more. And every step of the way, we say, absolutely not. Absolutely not. We're not going to cut rate. The more we cut rate, the more we're going to attract guests who are there because of rate, not because of the values that we embrace. And so to the point that Sarah made very, very loudly earlier in the conversation, some people aren't going to go way out of their way and pay more to come stay at a hotel that represents the values that they live by. Many people will. And now that doesn't mean that we're going to triple the price versus what they would otherwise. There is a limit. But when you set the price, I'll give you the example. In Mendocino, if you just go on Google search traditionally, and this is also going to lead into an AI discussion, but go on Google search and search for a hotel, say a hotel that's boutique, wellness-oriented, and associated with the beach or on the coastline. You can do that search on Google, and you'll get 104 different hotels that'll pop up. 100 of those hotels will all be priced in this tightly batched price point. Let's call it $250. And then there'll be 4 hotels that, in my opinion, get it, that are priced $300 or $400 above that. If you look at the product and you look at what they stand for and so on, there's not a big difference. Yet in each case, they understand, look, we're going to position ourselves at the premium pricing level because we're going to attract a premium customer, somebody who looks across the board and says, well, I don't want to stay at those 100 hotels because they're all the same. And I associate that with a commoditized experience. these guys that charge more, they must be better. They must be doing something different. I'm definitely going to select from one of those four. So orienting ourselves around that premium group is really important. It undoubtedly has to be supported by the other P's, the product and the programming. But that's the approach that we take. We set the suggested price at a premium level. And then, as we said, it's ultimately the consumer's decision on what price they actually pay. But getting them in the door, counterintuitively, the higher price brings people in the door, not the lower price.
I buy that. Yeah. And perhaps
I got a yes out of Sarah. I love this.
Yeah. I was going to say, perhaps I need more sound baths than tea ceremonies so I'll be less cranky. Yeah, no, I have this little short-term rental that I run in upstate New York, and I think that too about price. That's been my experience as well.
Okay, see, there you go.
There we go.
I knew we were aligned.
All right. Well, Ken, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story with us. It's really fascinating.
It's my pleasure.
Seth and I always say this when we talk to folks, but we need to go on like a road trip and like meet all the folks on the pod, visit all of their hotels, all of their places.
Pod on the road. I love that idea.
Yeah, exactly. We'll do it in person even. There you go.
Let's do it.
Well, thank you so much, Ken. Thank you everybody for listening today.
We'll see you next week. I loved it. Lots of counterintuitive but meaningful insights with Ken Cruz of Soul Community Planet. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.